Chad Zeitner and Jeremy Gregory are technically craft brewers, but you'll rarely find them hunched over a brew kettle. When they were priced out of building their own brewery, they outsourced production of their recipe and worked instead on crafting a distinct personality for their brand. That turned out to be a prescient move, but it wasn't the only one for Montucky Cold Snacks, their Montana-based challenger beer. While their peers were pursuing big IPAs, Zeitner and Gregory chose instead to emulate macro brewers with a low-calorie lager, understanding that young adventurers who drank Pabst Blue Ribbon would gravitate toward an affordable, drinkable brand of their own. Today, Montucky Cold Snacks is recognized as something of a pioneer in a revitalized light lager movement, and is the favorite of ski bums, river paddlers, rock climbers, and fly fishermen. Its recipe for success is what we'll be discussing with Chad and Jeremy this week on the Marketer's Brief. While its cheeky name and retro styling indicates a brand that doesn't take itself too seriously, Montucky is also big on supporting earth-friendly causes, donating 8% of its profits to nonprofit groups, and supporting events with groups like Leave No Trace, She Jumps, and Protect Our Rivers. That's one key to the brand's marketing strategy. Building out its retail presence, engaging through music and outdoor sports are others. I'm John Springer, senior reporter at Ad Age, and this is the Marketer's Brief podcast. Chad Zeitner and Jeremy Gregory, welcome to the Marketer's Brief podcast.
Awesome. Thanks, John.
Well, glad you guys could make it. You guys are the co-founders of Montucky Cold Snacks, which is a beer brand. And let's talk a little bit about the sort of origin story of the brand, and maybe a little bit about sort of how the vision for the company may have changed over the years.
Origin story, I'll try to make kind of short and sweet, but Chad and I both worked different careers prior to this, obviously. I worked wildland fire for 10 years. Chad was an electrical engineer for 10 years. Both were kind of looking for a different change in our lives in terms of careers and what we wanted to do and the impact that we wanted to make on the world. And it coincided that those two synchronicities happened in conjunction, and we met each other, and we both had this idea to create a craft brewery. Somewhere in the middle of that, we wanted our flagship beer to be a light, sessionable lager that would kind of be an alternative to major domestic lagers, but that would have a macro appeal in the sense that it was bigger, so it was available to more people for kind of a domestic price, not the super high craft price. And also that it kind of took itself a little bit. It was more about enjoying the beer in the moment with the friends that you were at. It was a little bit more irreverent as opposed to like some of the really high-end craft stuff that was really dominating the market at that time, where you were tasting for all these different things and pairing it with fancy meals. It was kind of just more the beer drinker's beer. So him and I started kind of collaborating on that idea, and one thing led to another, and we pitched this to the bar at the beginnings. We didn't pitch this to the bar. We pitched this to the banks, but at the beginnings, the banks didn't really feel good about this venture for an array of reasons. And ultimately, we wound up contracting all of the beer out, which allowed us to just focus on Montucky Cold Snacks, which is the light lager that is out in the market at this time. And it wound up being a really good thing because it let us really focus on the marketing and the branding a lot more than I think we otherwise would have been able to if we had built out an entire facility, brick and mortar, and we're brewing it ourselves and trying to distribute it and package it and all those other things. So that's kind of the origin story. Chad probably has things to chime in on that, but
No, I mean, you nailed it, Jeremy. I feel like a couple other little nuances would be like it also helped us with scaling too, because we didn't have to continually add tanks and build new buildings and things like that. So as the demand kind of, especially in the early days, was pretty exponential, it'd been really hard for us to keep up with that had we done what we originally wanted to do, which was build a traditional craft brewery with this as our flagship. If the banks would have said yes, we would be a completely different company, that's for sure.
That's really fascinating. And, there's a bunch of things that are interesting there. I mean, it seemed like everybody who had a brewery wanted to brew a heavy, gigantic IPA at that time, I would say. But it almost feels like you guys are up ahead of the curve here in recent times where there's some more brands coming up that are sort of this whole idea of the light lager has kind of been re-embraced by the consumer, but not necessarily the way they used to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's there's a lot of new entries into the space, I would say, and not that we're the original ones because there's been a lot of people who did it before us, but when we were kind of sitting there looking at this, there hadn't been a lot of newness or invigoration in the domestic space for a long time. I mean, that's kind of where Jeremy and I came from. We were ski bums, where we loved outdoors, getting out in nature, and we just wanted something to kind of augment what we were doing that didn't like take the focus and that you can actually still function. You can get off the river after having six of these versus six IPAs, like it's a whole different kind of thing we we're going for. And so that category really appealed to us. And the fact that there wasn't really anything new out there kind of gave us that entry point, kind of really, really try and go after that space.
Yeah, and you guys sort of understood the sort of, I don't know, this Western outdoor lifestyle, or what do you call it, ski bums, as you said. Why was that a good place for you to start as far as building an audience?
I'll let Jeremy chime in too. He's the marketing guru, but I feel like it was just who we were. It was like, authentic. It came naturally to us. So, meeting up with some skiers and giving them beer and finding those influencers in the different niches was, I mean, it was before there was really influencers, but it's just kind of like the organic growth and the places we were going to be anyways. So it just fit really well in a lot of ways.
And I guess the only thing that I would add to that is like there's something weird with ski culture where if you haven't been in ski culture, you probably don't know it as much. And I feel like some of this is actually kind of dying in a weird way. But in the olden days, ski culture had a very weird, quirky culture about it. And it's just kind of like irreverent humor, live in the moment. And so, I think when we were kind of building all that out, we felt like it was part of our personality. Obviously, we have the big Western images that we have and the outdoor images that we have and the charitable component that we have and kind of this retro Western thing that we do that complements the cold snackable beer that we wanted to create. But I feel like that culture really kind of helped us bring out our own personalities in a lot of ways as well, because Chad and I are goofy dudes. Like when we used to share an office together, we both work remotely now. We never got any work done because we would just talk about all number of things that have absolute, forever it was just when the robots were going to take over the world, which to this day, I've still kind of got it written down. Chad, we've only got about 3 years according to Chad, which he actually is getting a lot of alignment with the masters of AI, which is terrifying. But yeah, we've always kind of had like this quirky thing, and we grew up out here in the West. Both of us are not directly from a ranching family, but I'm directly from a ranching family. So there's a lot of stuff that kind of came together that we felt was unique and represented the area in a unique way and the market in a unique way that could kind of help the brand.
Well, and those roots really kind of expanded out, like to Jeremy's point, to like that quirkiness, that funness, that open to whatever your fun is. We embrace it.
Yeah, that's great. Let's kind of talk a little bit about your big marketing strategies now, kind of from a big picture perspective. What are you trying to get done? And do you have specific goals this year?
From a marketing standpoint, our big goals right now are we're working a lot trying to kind of build out more robust chain store and grocery store programming that really offers our brand not just as a beer, but as kind of like this whole snackable idea that we have. So we're trying to get different kind of placements throughout the door, and that way the other big things that we're doing as a brand, I guess there's kind of two other things. We've done a lot more music stuff. I think that's just the obvious one that a lot of brands do to get in front of our primary demographic. And then the last one I would say is to the point Chad was kind of making a little bit earlier is we really try to engage with our customers. And one of the things I've always said over the years is like, there's a lot of stuff that Montucky has led with in terms of a brand and marketing. So we'll lead with different things, whether it's on Instagram or whether it's a promotion that we do out in the market. But it's also really, we're always kind of listening and trying to find ways to really celebrate our customers and engage our customers and take cues from our customers as to what it will be that we do next. So really just building out different types of opportunities that allow us to meet those objectives.
I would add maybe a little bit more because it's on the charity and nonprofit side. We've always kind of done a lot of the grassroots, the super small charity stuff. That's always been who and what we are, and we'll continue to do that. But we've really started kind of focusing on some more regional, national. They're still not large players in the world, but nonprofits that kind of allow us to kind of cover a bigger geography. One of which is Leave No Trace. It's just all about best practices to keep nature natural for and She Jumps is another one we're working with, which is about getting women in outdoors and in leadership positions and kind of education in that realm. And then also Protect Our Rivers. Those are kind of our three main call them national charities we've been working with this year. So we're doing some pretty fun stuff with those, from river series cleanups to just hosting different events with them, and then just a ton of like the small little stuff too. I think those really kind of build that grassroots swell community engagement. I mean, it checks a lot of boxes for us, and that's been something that's been core to Jeremy and I since day one.
Yeah. I know your brand attracted the attention of Gallo, I think it was a year ago around, or maybe it might be longer than that. I wonder sort of how life has changed, if at all, since they came aboard and what you can tell me about that transaction.
It's life's changed quite a bit for me, probably more than Jeremy. I used to kind of be a lot more on the operation side. So, the logistics, kind of running that piece of the puzzle. And, with Gallo, they have a whole arm that deals with all that stuff. So when a truck turns over, I'm not dealing with insurance claims and, the minutia of that kind of, or, doesn't show up, or you miss a pickup, or trying to order the right amount of beer for depending on the season, all that kind of stuff, somebody else is doing. So I get to focus a lot more on the fun stuff, from events to market visits to the charity work is a big piece of what I'm doing now. So it's been super nice having those resources. I don't want to speak for Jeremy, but I think the resources they have on the marketing side have allowed him to do a lot more of the things he's wanted to.
Is that true, Jeremy?
Yeah, I would just say it's allowed us to do all kinds of stuff and freed us up to be able to kind of start exploring all kinds of things that we were previously pie in the sky. And like a lot of my time that I spend right now, I spend on graphics and stuff like that, which seems kind of weird, but I've been building a lot of just graphic stuff out that needed to happen over the last few years because I'm a big proponent and believing that the aesthetic of the brand is super important, and whether it's anything from a tabletop all the way up to a major promotional piece. So really just trying to dial in like all of our standards and all that stuff. It's stuff that I've never been able to do, and we have the resources that can also then again not also simultaneously handle big events and partnerships and collaborations and those sorts of things. So
Yeah, you obviously do a lot of the stuff yourself. Are you at a point where you could sort of trust stuff to an agency, or have you worked with agencies before? What's your view on that?
we've always worked with agencies, and it's just about finding a right fit, you know? And I think you can get lucky and you can give it to somebody and somebody instantly gets it and they seamlessly integrate into the brand and bring new things to the brand that feel organic and natural and that you would have never thought of, and those are great. But more often than not, it's kind of more of a this is working partially, so you got to kind of tweak it here and there, or this isn't, it's not the right fit. But yeah, we've, prior to Gallo, we worked with several different agencies and we're continuing to work with several different agencies. And so a lot of the stuff, like I said, that I'm working on right now is just trying to streamline those processes, the onboarding. Here's kind of how we want to show up and how we want things to come back to us for review so that we can make everything smooth.
Gotcha. Now, not speaking for Gallo, but what did they see in you?
I mean, Chad and I are both strapping young men, so as you can see, what wouldn't they want? I think that the brand was growing in a way and resonating with customers in a way, like we've kind of mentioned earlier on the call, that really attracted them. Also, we do stand behind our beer, we feel like it's a really great product. And so kind of the combination of those two things and the charitable component are this perfect storm of a brand that they felt like could really complement their portfolio and grow into the malt division where they'd never been before, and where it would take, even with their kind of firepower, it would take a lot to build something from scratch.
Yeah, yeah. So it is pretty interesting that they got into beer through you guys. And, was it a competitive process, or did you have other suitors at the time, or how did that go?
Yeah, I mean, no, I wouldn't say it was like a competitive process because we were kind of in an interesting space prior to this. We were looking at bringing on a CEO. We kind of were at that place where it's like, I wouldn't say we've taken it as far as we could with Jeremy and I's skill set. We were close, and we knew we needed to either bring in a lot of investment and, with that, somebody kind of who knew how to take it to the next level. So kind of through that process, we're starting to interview some CEO candidates and simultaneously looking out for some additional investment. And then through that kind of whole process, Gallo had reached out and it seemed like a pretty good fit. We had a couple other, I don't know that you want to call them suitors, but like same scenarios. But when you looked at everything wholesale from the ethos Gallo takes when they top to bottom, their charitable component, the amount of land they set aside for conservation in California is insane. It just felt really well.
Last question. I guess we're running low on time. Any brands out there that you take inspiration from, or you find that are just fun, or you've learned from out there, each of you?
I've always taken inspiration from Vans Shoe Company, which is kind of random in terms of the beer space, but I liked how they always kind of approached things and thought differently about how they move into spaces. There's several beer companies that over the years I've, really, really liked what they've done. I thought they've done really creative things. Lagunitas, I think, does really cool work over the years that I've liked. I guess those would be my kind of big ones. Patagonia, at least in terms of like our outdoor aesthetic and our give back component, I've kind of talked about them multiple times in terms of their 1% back commitment, and a lot of just there's a lot more, I think, beyond that 1% that they do, just in terms of like local activations and support stuff that they do. But those would be kind of my big ones.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo Jeremy on the Patagonia from, like how they treat their employees, and like kind of that adage of I think they were one of the first ones to have like an in-house daycare system and top to bottom, that book Let My People Go Surfing was pretty inspirational, especially in our early days. And it's not easy trying to navigate, employee benefits and, when you're a team of 10 and trying to like get healthcare and navigate that stuff out, but it's super important. So, kind of having that guide star there and seeing what they did was cool.
Well, with that, guys, we're about out of time. Chad, Jeremy, thanks so much for coming by.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, John.
Appreciate it.
That was my discussion with Chad Zeitner and Jeremy Gregory, co-founders of Montucky Cold Snacks. And I'm John Springer, senior reporter at Ad Age. I'd like to thank our producer, Lauren Ciardio, and remind you that you can subscribe to The Marketer's Brief wherever you get your podcasts. That's all for now. We'll see you next week.
Marketer's Brief listeners get $40 off an adage.com subscription. Sharpen your marketing edge and visit adage.com/brief for your discount.